This tutorial is about how to make a lost wax investment mold. The item you see in front of you is a wax sculpture. It's made with microcrystalline wax, and it was made by my neighbor Lisa. So we're going to turn this into a piece of metal. The first step is to attach the sprue and the vent. The sprue is where the metal goes in, and the vent is where the gases from the burning wax come out. Ideally, the sprue will fill from the bottom, and the vent will be at the top. I didn't set it up that way because I was afraid with those thin petals on the rose that I wouldn't get good fill if I put the sprue all the way to the bottom. So the sprue and the vent are essentially right beside each other. And you'll see later what happens. We get a bit of metal splatter when we cast it. But the piece came out beautifully. So if you have to, you can do it this way. Now I'm just going to stick the sprue and the vent to the bottom of this plastic dish, and then we'll fill it with the investment material, which in this case is just going to be straight plaster of Paris. It's readily available and cheap, and it seems to work pretty good. Now we're going to mix up the investment material. I have two identical dollar store generic Tupperware things. It makes it a lot easier because one will hold the plaster, will hold the model, and the other one I can use to mix up the exact right amount of plaster. Very convenient. Now to mix up the plaster, first you pour out the water you're going to need. Assume you're going to about double in volume when you add the plaster. And then you're going to add the plaster to the water by sprinkling it on top. It'll form little islands, and then the little islands will sink. And you just keep doing that until when it gets near full, the little islands won't sink anymore. They'll just stay there on the top. And that's when you know you've got enough plaster. So you stir it up and let it set 2 to 5 minutes to soak. And then it'll be ready to pour. Here's some exciting footage of me stirring plaster. It's just here so that you can see what the consistency should look like. A lot of people think that their plaster is too runny, but it really is quite thin when you pour it, which is a good thing. It catches all the small details of the model. Now here I am pouring the mold, and you can see I start pouring it around the base there. I want to get a little bit of plaster around the base so the model doesn't tip over or anything. And then I start pouring it right into the flower, to the most complicated part, because I want to make sure all those crevices and everything get filled with plaster. So there is the plaster setting up. Now is a good time to clean up and usually shut down for the day, because it's going to take 3 or 4 hours for the plaster to be completely set. And even after that, the plaster is going to have to dry. And usually, if you just dry it naturally, that's going to take a few days. This is the mold after it's solidified. Now it's just a block of plaster. It's still wet and needs to dry quite a bit. You can see how it just came out of the Tupperware there. Those two things are the sprue and the vent. And, well, that's basically what it looks like. Now we just have to wait for it to dry and then melt the wax out. Now comes the part where we melt out the wax. I've done this before just by putting the whole mold in the oven with some sort of tray to catch the melting wax. But last time I was using beeswax, and it took quite a while to get it to melt out, but it came out fine. This time with the microcrystalline wax, it started to smell and was burning the wax a little. So I took it out and discovered that it had not melted the wax out completely. It had, however, cracked the mold. There was a crack that went all the way through in the sprue area. So I didn't want to put it back in the oven. Following that, I put it in the microwave for about 5 minutes. Within about a minute and a half, the microwave was full of smoke, and I had to rush around trying to stop the smoke alarm from going off. But the microwave melted the wax out really quickly and really easily. Probably want to check on it about every 30 seconds or so, and you should be fine. The wax cleaned out nicely. Here I am testing the metal to see if it's ready to pour. If you're interested in this little charcoal smelter, there's a link in the description. And so I'm just checking it, and it's ready. So here we are getting ready to pour. And there you can see the problem with the sprue and the vent, the gating system. The gases and the metal are basically in the same hole, and the burning gases want to spit the metal all over the place. So probably should have considered a better gating system, maybe turning the piece sideways and having the gate come in from, or the sprue come in from the bottom, and the vent go out the top that way. But the piece did come out nicely, so it was a little hazardous there when it was spitting metal, but the piece did come out very nice. Here's the poured mold. You can see those cracks opened up a bit. Didn't end up being a problem on the piece. There was a little bit of a fin to be filed off, but that was it. Now we're going to open the mold, and that's how you open an investment mold. You hit it with a hammer. I'm going pretty easy on it here because of the fine petals and the fine parts of the sculpture. When you're working with a part, a machine part or something, a lot of times you'll be hitting it pretty hard with the hammer if it's a good tough piece. I'm making an important mistake here. I'm holding the sculpture by the leaf you should hold the piece by the sprue or the vent or something that's going to be cut off, because you don't want the pliers to do any damage to the finished piece. Now, I didn't end up doing any damage to the leaf, but still a chance you don't need to take. You usually want to brush it while it's hot, and you can just brush all the plaster right off it. In this case, because of the petals of the rose and everything, there was no way I was going to be able to brush all that out. I ended up having to take dental tools and scrape it all out. Okay, this is the rough casting. It's just come out of the mold, and I still have to scrape all that plaster out of it. But at this stage we call it the rough casting. Now, when we cut off the sprue and everything, you get this. This is the finished casting. It's also the finished piece. This is what the artist wanted, just a gray metal rose. So this is an example of what you can do with investment molding. Well, thank you for watching.